Welcome to the 1000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 891st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Princess Miriam and Nur al-Din alighted in that valley, they ate of its fruits and drank of its streams, after turning the stallions loose to pasture. Then they sat talking and recalling their past, and all that had befallen them, and complaining one to the other of the pangs of parting, and of the hardships suffered by estrangement and love-longing. As they were thus engaged, behold, there arose in the distance a dust cloud, which spread till it walled the world, and they heard the neighing of horses, and the clank of arms and armor. Now the reason of this was that after Princess had been bestowed in wedlock upon the Wazir, who had gone into her that night, the king went forth at daybreak to give the couple good morrow, taking with him, after the custom of kings, with their daughters a gift of silken stuffs, and scattering gold and silver among the eunuchs and tirewomen, that they might snatch it and scramble for it. And he fared on, escorted by one of his pages. But when he came to the new palace, he found the Wazir prostrate on the carpet, knowing not his head from his heels. So he searched the place right and left for his daughter, but found her not. Whereat he was troubled sore with concern galore, and his wits forlorn. Then he bade bring hot water, and virgin vinegar, and frankincense, and mingling them together, blew the mixture into the Wazir's nostrils, and shook him, whereupon he cast the bang forth of his stomach, as it were a bit of cheese. He repeated the process, whereupon the minister came to himself, and the king questioned him of his case and that of his daughter. He replied, O mighty king, I have no knowledge of her save that she poured me out a cup of wine with her own hand, and from that tide to this I have no recollection of aught, nor know what has become of her. When the king heard this, the light in his eyes became night, and he drew his scimitar and smote the Wazir on the head, that the steel came out gleaming from between his grinder teeth. Then, without an instant delay, he called the grooms and syce, and demanded of them the 2 stallions. But they said, O king, the 2 steeds were lost in the night, and together with them our chief, the master of horse. For when we awoke in the morning, we found all the doors wide open. Cried the king, By the faith of me, and by all wherein my belief established on certainty, none but my daughter hath taken the steeds, she and the Moslem captive, which used to tend the church, and which took her before time. Indeed, I knew him right well, and none delivered him from my hand, save this one-eyed Wazir. But now he is requited his deed. Then the king called his 3 sons, who were 3 doughty champions, each of whom could withstand 1,000 horse in the field of strife, and the stead where cut and thrust are rife, and bade them mount. So they took forthwith, and the king and the flower of his knights and nobles and officers mounted with them, and followed on the trail of the fugitives, till Miriam saw them, when she mounted her charger, and baldricked her blade, and took her arms. Then she said to Nur al-Din, How is it with thee, and how is thy heart for fight and strife and fray? Said he, Verily, my steadfastness in battle van is as the steadfastness of the stake in bran. And he improvised and said, O Miriam, thy chiding I pray forgore, nor drive me to death or injurious blow. How can I hope to bear fray and fight, who quake at the croak of the corby crow? I, who shiver for fear when I see the mouse, and for very funk I be piss my clo. I love no foin but the poke in bed, when quaint well knoweth my prickle's prow. This is rightful rede, and none other shows righteous as this in my sight, I trow. Now when Miriam heard his speech and the verse he made, she laughed and smilingly said, O my lord Nur al-Din, abide in thy place, and I will keep thee from ill grace, though they be as the sea sands in number. But mount and ride in rear of me, and if we be defeated and put to flight, beware of falling, for none can overtake thy steed. So saying, she turned her lance head towards for in plain, and gave her horse the rein. Whereupon he darted off under her like the stormy gale, or like waters from that straightness of pipes out rail. Now Miriam was the doughtiest of the folk of her time, and the unique pearl of her age and tide, for her father had taught her, whilst she was yet little, on steeds to ride, and dive deep during the darkness of the night in the battle-tide. When the king saw her charging down upon them, he knew her, but too well, and turning to his eldest son, said, O Bortad, thou who art surnamed Ras al-Kiliat, this is assuredly thy sister Miriam, who chargeth upon us, and she seeketh to wage war and fight fray with us. So go thou out to give her battle. And I enjoy thee by the Messiah and the faith which is no liar. Thou get the better of her, kill her not, till thou have propounded to her the Nazarene faith. And she return to her old creed, bring her to me prisoner. But an she refuse, do her die by the foulest death, and make of her the vilest of examples, as well as the accursed which is with her. Quoth Bartat, hearkening in obedience, and rushing out forthright to meet his sister, said to her, O Miriam, doth not what happened already befallen us on thine account sufficeth thee? But thou must leave the faith of thy fathers and forefathers, and follow after the faith of the vagrants in the lands? That is to say, the faith of all Islam? By the virtue of the Messiah and the faith which is no liar, except thou return to the creed of the kings thy forebears, and walk therein after the goodliest fashion, I will put thee to ill death, and make of thee the most shameful of examples. But Miriam laughed at his speech and replied, Well away! Far be it that the Pasha present stay, or that he who is dead should again see day. I will make thee drink the sourest of regrets. By Allah, I will not turn back upon the faith of Mohammed, son of Abdullah, who made salvation general, for this is the true faith. Nor will I leave the right road, though I drain the cup of ruin. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 892nd night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Miriam exclaimed to her brother, Well away! Heaven forfend that I turn back from the faith of Mohammed, Abdullah's son, who made salvation general. For this is the right road, nor will I leave it, although I drain the cup of ruin. When the accursed Bartat heard this, the light in his eyes became night. The matter was great and grievous to him, and between them there befell a sore fight. The twain swayed to and fro, battling throughout the length and the breadth of the valley, and manfully enduring the stress of combat singular, whilst all eyes upon them were fixed in admiring surprise. After which they wheeled around and foined and feinted for a long bout, and as often as Bartat opened on his sister Miriam a gate of war, she closed it, and put it to naught of the goodliness of her skill, and her art in the use of arms, and her cunning of cavalrous. Nor ceased they so doing till the dust overhung their heads vault-wise, and they were hidden from men's eyes. And she ceased not to baffle Bartat, and stop the way upon him, till he was weary, and his courage wavered, and his resolution was worsted, and his strength weakened. Whereupon she smote him on the nape, that the sword came out gleaming from his throat tendons, and Allah hurried his soul to the fire, and the abiding place which is dire. Then Miriam wheeled about in the battle plain instead, where cut and thrust are fain, and championed it, and offered battle, crying out and saying, Who is for the fighting? Who is for the jousting? Let come forth to me today, no weakling or niddering. Ah, let none come forth to me but the champions, who the enemies of the faith represent, that I may give them to drink the cup of ignominious punishment. O worshippers of idols, O miscreants, O rebellious folk, this day verily shall the faces of the people of the true faith be whitened, and theirs who deny the compassionate be blackened. Now, when the king saw his eldest son slain, he smote his face, and rent his dress, and cried out to his second son, saying, O Bartus, thou who art surnamed Kara Alsus, go forth, O my son, in haste, and do battle with thy sister Miriam. Avenge me the death of thy brother Bartat, and bring her to me a prisoner abject and humiliated. He answered, Hearkening in obedience, O my sire, and charging down drave at his sister, who met him in mid-career, and they fought, he and she, a sore fight, yet sorer than the first. Bartus right soon found himself unable to cope with her might, and would have sought safety in flight, but of the greatness of her prowess could not avail until this slight. For as often as she turned to flee, she drave after him, and still clave to him, and pressed him hard, till presently she smote him with the sword in his throat, that it issued gleaming from his nape, and sent him after his brother. Then she wheeled about in mid-field and plain, where cut and thrust are dealt, crying out and saying, Where be the knights? Where be the braves? Where is that one-eyed wazir, the lamenter of the crooked faith, the worthy believer? Thereupon the king, her father, cried out with heart and bleeding eyes, in tear-ulcerated eyes, saying, She hath slain my second son by the virtue of the Messiah, and the faith which is no liar. And he called aloud to his youngest son, saying, O Fasain, named Salth al-Subain, go forth, O my son, to do battle with thy sister, and take of her the blood-wreck for thy brothers, and fall on her, come what may, and whether thou gain or thou lose this day, and if thou conquer her, slay her with the foulest of slaughter. So he drave it to Miriam, who ran at him with the best of her skills, and charged him with the goodliness of her cleverness, and of her courage, and of her cunning in fence and cavalrous, crying to him, O accursed, O enemy of Allah and the Moslems, I will assuredly send thee after thy brothers, and woeful is the abiding place of the miscreants. So saying, she unsheathed her sword, and smote him, and cut off his head and arms, and sent him after his brothers. And Allah hurried his soul to the fire, in the abiding place dire. Now when the knights and the riders who rode with their sire saw his 3 sons slain, who were the doughtiest of the folk of their day, there fell on their hearts terror of the Princess Miriam. Awe of her overpowered them. They bowed their heads earthward, and they made sure of ruin and confusion, disgrace and destruction. And they made sure of the flames of hate blazing in their heart. They turned their backs forthright and addressed themselves to flight. When the king saw his son slain, and his flying troops cast sight, there fell on him bewilderment and affright, whilst his heart also was afire for despite. Then quoth he to himself, In very sooth, Princess Miriam hath belittled us, and if I venture myself and go out against her alone, haply she will gar me succumb and slay me without ruth, even as she slew her brothers, and make of me the foulest of examples. For she hath no longer any desire for us, nor have we of her return any hope. Wherefore it would be better rede that I guard mine honor and return to my capital. So he gave reins to his charger and rode back to his city. But when he found himself in his palace, fire was loosed in his heart for rage and chagrin at the death of his 3 gallant sons, and the defeat of his troops, and the disgrace to his honor. Nor did he abide half an hour ere he summoned his grandees and officers of state, and complained to them that his daughter Miriam had done with him of the slaughter of her brothers, and all he suffered therefrom of passion and chagrin, and sought advice of them. They all counseled him to write to the vicar of Allah in his earth, the commander of the faithful, Harun al-Rashid, and acquaint him with his circumstances. So he wrote a letter to the caliph, containing after the usual salutation the following words. We have a daughter, Miriam the Girdle-Girl hight, who hath been seduced and debauched from us by a Moslem captive named Nur al-Din Ali, son of the merchant Taj al-Din of Cairo, and he hath taken her by night, and went forth with her to his own country. Wherefore I beg of the favor of our Lord, of the commander of the faithful, that he write to all the lands of the Moslems to seize her and send her back to us by a trusty messenger. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 893rd night, she pursued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king of France wrote to the caliph and prince of the true believers, Harun al-Rashid, a writ humbling himself by asking for his daughter Miriam, and begging of his favor that he write to all the Moslems, enjoining her seizure and sending her back to him by a trusty messenger of the servants of his highness the commander of the faithful, adding, And in requital of your help and aidance in this matter, we will appoint to you half of the city of Rome the Great, that thou mayest build therein mosques for the Moslems, and the tribute thereof shall be forwarded to you. And after writing this writ by reed of his grandees and lords of the land, he folded the scroll and called his wazir, whom he had appointed in the stead of the monocular minister, bade him seal it with the seal of the kingdom, and officers of state, and also set hands and seals thereto, after which the king bade the wazir bear the letter to Baghdad, the palace of peace, and had it into the caliph's own hand, saying, An thou bring her back, thou shalt have of me fiefs of 2 emirs, and I will bestow on thee a robe of honor, and 2 full fringes of gold. The wazir set out with the letter, and fared on over hill and dale, till he came to the city of Baghdad, where he abode 3 days, till he was rested from the way, when he sought the palace of the commander of the faithful, and when guided thereto he entered it, and craved audience. The Caliph bade admit him, so he went in, and kissing ground before him, handed to him the letter of the King of France, together with rich gifts and rare presents, beseeming the commander of the faithful. When the Caliph read the writ and apprehended its significance, he commanded his wazir to write without stay or delay dispatches to all the lands of the Moslems, setting out the name and favor of Princess Miriam and of Nur al-Din, stating how they had eloped, and bidding all who found them lay hands on them and send them to the commander of the faithful, and warning them on no wise in that matter to use delay or indifference. So the wazir wrote the letters, and sealing them dispatched them by couriers to the different governors, who hastened to obey the Caliph's commandment, and addressed themselves to make search in all the lands for the persons of such name and favor. On this wise it fared the governors and their subjects, but as regards Nur al-Din and Miriam the Girdle-Girl, they fared on without delay after defeating the King of France and his force, and the Protector protected them till they came to the land of Syria and entered Damascus city. Now the couriers of the Caliph had foregone them thither by a day, and the Emir of Damascus knew he was commanded to arrest the twain as soon as he found them, that he might send them to the Caliph. Accordingly, when they entered the city, the secret police accosted them and asked them their names. They told them the truth, and acquainted them with their adventure, and all that had betided them. Whereupon they knew them for those of whom they were in the siege and seizing, and carried them before the governor of the city. He dispatched them to the city of Baghdad under escort of his officers, who, when they came thither, craved audience of the Caliph, which he graciously granted. So they came into the presence, and kissing ground before them, and said, O commander of the faithful, this is Miriam the Girdle-Girl, daughter of the King of France, and this is the captive Nur al-Din, son of the merchant Taj al-Din of Cairo, who debauched her from her sire, and stealing her from his kingdom and country, fled with her to Damascus, where we found the twain as they entered the city, and questioned them. They told us the truth of their case, so we laid hands on them and brought them before thee. The Caliph looked at Miriam, and saw that she was slender and shapely of form and stature, the handsomest of the folk of her type, and the unique pearl of her age and her time, sweet of speech and fluent of tongue, stable of soul and hearty of heart. Thereupon she kissed the ground between his hands, and wished him permanence of glory and prosperity, and surcease of evil and enmity. He admired the beauty of her figure, and the sweetness of her voice, and the readiness of her replies, and said to her, Art thou Miriam the Girdle-Girl, daughter of the King of France? Answered she, Yes, O Prince of true believers, and priest of those who the unity of Allah receive, and defender of the faith, and cousin of the primate of the apostles. Then the Caliph turned to Nur al-Din Ali, and seeing him to be a shapely youth, as he were the shining full moon on 14th night, said to him, And thou, art thou Ali Nur al-Din, son of the merchant Taj al-Din of Cairo? Said he, Yes, O commander of the faithful, and stay of those who for righteousness are careful. The Caliph asked, How cometh it thou hast taken this damsel, and fled forth with her of her father's kingdom? So Nur al-Din proceeded to relate to the commander of the faithful all his past, first and last, whereat the Caliph was astonished with extreme astonishment, and diverted, and exclaimed, How manifold are the sufferings that men suffer! And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease the telling of this tale for today, till it be morrow.